This is the immune system by Sophie, Caroline, and Jennifer. Let's start off with the innate immune system.
So the first thing you really need to know about the innate immune system is the types of cells that are involved. And there are three, so it's the macrophage, the neutrophil, and the eosinophil. Two of these are involved in phagocytosis, and that is the macrophage and the neutrophil, which I spelled wrong. So instead of doing phagocytosis, a eosinophil discharges destructive enzymes to kill the pathogen.
So the inflammatory response is part of the innate immune system and how it responds to a foreign pathogen. So what happens is there's a tear in the skin, for example, pathogens are coming in through that tear. And remember that neutrophils are circulating through the bloodstream and they're attracted to signals from tears like this. So the signal is sent from the tear, from the receptors, to the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus sends out signals for the capillaries to dilate. And how they dilate is by histamines, and histamines are made by the adrenal gland. So the hypothalamus gets a signal, sends a signal down to the adrenal gland to make histamines, and the histamines dilate the capillary. And what that does for the capillary and for the foreign invaders is the neutrophils that are circulating throughout the blood become closer to the tear in the skin so that it can finally get the foreign invader and do something to it to avoid further infection. So how exactly do the neutrophils kill or destroy the foreign invaders? Well, they do this by phagocytosis like we talked about before. Some barrier defenses are like skin, which is acidic and prevents growth of bacteria on your skin, mucus, which also traps bacteria and viruses and prevents them from traveling farther, and hairs, like your nose hairs, that keep trash and other nasty stuff out of your insides.
The two important lymphocytes that you need to know are B cells and T cells. Okay, so the first one that we need to talk about is a B cell, and they mature in the bone marrow. Basically, what their structure is they you have a cell body, and then you have the antigen receptors on the outside, which are the binding site for the antigens. So now what you're about to see me draw are still B cells, but they now have a different name. They are called plasma cells. What's the difference between the two? So basically, the antigen receptors that you see attached to the B cell in the original picture are now not attached to the plasma cells. What they do after they break away from the B cell is that they carry the antigen back to the innate white blood cells that we mentioned before. So now into the process of the adaptive immune system. Basically, we're going to start off with three different types of B cells. One could be the stomach virus, the other could be strep, and the last one could be the flu. I think here we're going to follow the strep B cell all the way through the process, so stay tuned for more.
So it's important to note that every antigen requires a specific antigen receptor attached to the B cell for it to actually be effective in killing the antigen. How B cells are able to make sure that they get the correct antigen receptor is a process called genetic recombination, which takes a while. That's why you will most likely show symptoms for like a week or so before it's actually able to find the correct receptor DNA so that it can effectively destroy the antigen.
So the original B cell will go through the process described previously called genetic recombination, and then it will undergo a process called clonal selection, and that's basically when it just makes a bunch of the same cell with the same receptor so it can quickly and effectively kill the antigen. So after clonal selection, they break off into two groups of cells. One of them being the plasma cells that I talked about earlier, where the antigen receptors break off and become antibodies, which bring the antigens to the white blood cells, and the white blood cells will destroy them. And the other group of cells are called memory cells. And basically, they're just stored away in your bone marrow for the next time you get sick and the pathogen enters your body.
So now we will go through a process, or two different processes, called humoral immune response and the cell-mediated immune response. And although they end up in two different areas, they are activated by the same thing. So it begins with a dendritic cell, which is like a cell on your tongue, for example, and it first detects the pathogen with the antigen. It then sends out for a helper T cell, which is made in the thymus, and the helper T cell kind of absorbs or attaches to that dendritic cell with the antigen, and it sees the antigen, and then it releases cytokines. And cytokines are the activators for either B cells or cytotoxic T cells. Cytotoxic T cells are very different from B cells in the sense that they sacrifice themselves and they not only kill the antigen, but they basically kill any cell that is infected with the virus to prevent it from going any further and infecting any more cells. So even if the cell is healthy, the cytotoxic T cell will kill it to avoid further infection. And the cytokines also activate the B cells and go through the same exact process as we drew before. The point of this entire process is to leave behind a healthy organism.